Here are 8 of the most highly rated, highly favored whiskeys going on the market right now. What's up, everybody? It's Ty the Bourbon Guy, and welcome back to another whiskey video. Today, we're going to talk about 8 whiskeys that are highly favored, the most highly ranked whiskeys that people seem to absolutely love, and I'm going to give my take on each of these. So let's get started. All right, number 1, Wild Turkey Rare Breed. It seems to be on every single person's list. I think a lot of these probably are going to be on every single person's list when I've come across WhiskeyTube or different articles or whatever the case is. This one, I agree. Wild Turkey Rare Breed is an absolutely phenomenal product, and not just a great whiskey, but the price point that they have it at, the fact that it's available, all these things, I do think that this is a great whiskey to get. If you are somebody who is relatively new to whiskey and maybe higher proof just isn't your game, or maybe you've been into whiskey and higher proof just still isn't your thing, that's okay too. A lot of these whiskeys, it seems like people mention you have to go get certain ones that are such a high proof, and I don't necessarily agree with that. If somebody is really into higher proof whiskeys, then a lot of these on this list are going to be really good for you. But if you're somebody who doesn't necessarily like higher proof whiskeys, then a lot of the times suggesting that somebody go try Rare Breed is probably not the best bet. This one I agree with. I do think it's a fantastic whiskey. I think it should be on this list. I think it should be highly favored and highly ranked and all that other stuff. But I would say, as an alternative, you can also get Russell's Reserve. That line is amazing to me. The single barrels are very good. The 10-year is also very good. Plenty available, at least in my area, of the 10-year. Lower proof still introduces you to Wild Turkey, but you may not have to go at such a high proof with Rare Breed. All right, number 2, Old Forester 1920. Now this one is also on everybody's list. All these are going to be on everybody's list. Like, you know, that's the whole point of the video, right? But Old Forester 1920, the first time I ever had this, it actually blew me away. The thing about it was, yes, this was a higher proof. At 115 proof, when I first had this, I was still kind of getting into higher proof whiskeys, and at the time, it felt very hot. I think the thing to think about is, regardless of how acclimated you get to a higher proof whiskey, it can still drink hot. Just because I'm used to drinking higher proof whiskeys does not make this any less hot. But this was the first one that I had at that type of proof point where I could really get the flavors out of it. It was one that I really, really enjoyed. I had to sip it a little slower. In the beginning, I started adding water just to kind of bring it down a little bit, but I could still get a lot of that flavor out of there. So again, this is one that I agree with. It should be on everybody's list. Old Forester 1920 is a fantastic product. They do make other products that are very good as well. 1910 gets a lot of love out of the Whiskey Rose series from Old Forester. And even Old Forester 100 proof. I think the orange label one is one that, if you're kind of getting introduced to Old Forester products and you don't want to make that jump to a higher proof, or you don't want to make that jump price-wise, you just want to see if Old Forester whiskey is for you or not, I would try the 100 proof. That's another great product that also should be looked at if this is not one that you're necessarily ready for yet. All right, number 3 on the list, Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. Should be no shock. I mean, I think a lot of people rated this C923 batch from last year as one of the whiskeys of the year. This is one, when I reviewed it, I even mentioned in the review that I had to be more critical. Anytime a bottle gets this much hype, whiskey of the year, everybody's chasing it, I always look at the approach of, is it actually that good? Does it deserve that type of hype? Or do we just like to jump on the bandwagon and hop on that train and all that stuff and just say it's a fantastic bottle? So I try to actually be a little bit more critical when it's in that situation. Even with me being critical, it was one of the best whiskeys I've ever had, and definitely the best one I had last year. So this particular bottle, this particular batch was fantastic, the C923. But I try to tell people not to get so stuck and caught up in the batches from batch to batch. Yes, they are going to vary. Yes, there's going to be some that are better than others. But overall, the Elijah Craig Barrel Proof series is still a very good line of whiskey. It's fantastic bourbon, regardless of the age or the proof. If you're as much of an enthusiast to where you can kind of pick out these details and really pick up on the nuances within that whiskey and the batch to batch, sure. But if you're somebody that's getting into whiskey, barrel proof at all, it's going to be a great bottle for you to have. And the same type of thing, if you're not necessarily ready to make that jump, there's nothing wrong with Elijah Craig, the 94 proof, the regular small batch. And if you can find a store pick or a club pick or something like that of the 94 proof, even better. All right, number 4, Knob Creek. Knob Creek, a lot of people love the 9-year. 9-year at 120 proof. And for me, this is one that I will actually say I disagree with. Knob Creek is one that it must be good to a lot of people because a lot of people seem to enjoy it. So I'll say that. For me, when I first got introduced to Knob Creek, it was some of the older store picks. It was a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old at 120 proof. That type of age, at that type of proof, I thought this was an amazing whiskey. So now when I go to either a younger Knob Creek bottle, so we're talking maybe 9 years and, you know, proof's still there, but the age isn't there. Or we go the other direction where I can find the 12-year, I can find a 15-year, I can find an 18-year, but they're all 100 proof instead of 120. To me, ever since I had the original, I'm always looking for that bottle and I can't find it. I'm not in a regular Knob Creek. I understand why people gravitate towards it. It's just not necessarily for me. Something else in that range would be from Jim Beam. I would say Booker's is one of my absolute favorites. I also think if you can find Baker's 7-year that's maybe actually 8 years old or something like that, those are also pretty good. So even though the fact that people love this one, does it deserve the hype nowadays that I think it gets? In my opinion, not necessarily. All right, number 5, let's stick with Jim Beam. Old Grandad 114. Now, this one is one that, same type of thing. The proof point is great. I think the price is really what kind of plays in here. I actually found this bottle for about $25 or something like that here locally. And $25 for 114 proof whiskey that actually tastes pretty good is fantastic. So if we're talking about budget whiskeys, if we're talking about under $30, if we're talking about the competition within that price range and what that offers, I could see how this starts to take the cake. I will say as an alternative for this one, the Old Grandad Bonded is actually one that I prefer over the 114. I do think that the 114 can drink kind of hot. I think that if you're using it within a cocktail and all that stuff, absolutely perfect. But I do think that the Bonded lends itself to be a little bit more approachable and one that I can kind of go to a little bit more frequently. All right, number 6, Bardstown Bourbon Company. Probably anything that they do is always highly ranked and highly favored and all that stuff. But their Origin series specifically has been one that just seems to take off. Everybody seems to absolutely love this bottle. And this particular one is the Wheated Mash Bill. And this is one that I have to keep it in perspective because Bardstown Bourbon Company Discovery Series is one of my favorite lines probably ever. I think batch 3 and batch 4 were absolutely amazing. Batch 1 even made me stop and say, what is this, right? That was before anybody even knew about Bardstown Bourbon Company. But now to kind of look at batch 10, batch 11, these are all whiskeys that are still blended very well and still very good products, but what can they do on their own? That was always kind of the question with Bardstown. Now they have this, you know, keeping in mind that this bottle may be in that $40 to $50 range and a Discovery Series is going to be somewhere in the $130 to $150 range. That has to be in the forefront of your mind. At least for me, I have to remind myself that I should be getting a better experience out of Discovery than this bottle because I've paid almost $100 more for that bottle. To also keep this in perspective, they have the Fusion Series. I would take the Origin Series, either bottle, over probably most of the Fusion Series. I think especially as of late, for me personally, it just kind of has fallen off a little bit, but still plenty of people that enjoy Fusion. But this one is one that I think if it's between those two, Fusion is a higher price. I don't know that it should be. I think Origin is one that is a better product, and I can see why people love this one. I'm still gonna lean to the Discovery Series or now the Origin Series, but a single barrel. But I can still see why people love it. All right, number 7, Wild Turkey 101. This one is on the most underrated, most overrated, under budget, whiskey of the year, my daily sipper, you know, whatever the case is. It doesn't matter what the list is. Wild Turkey 101 is probably going to be on that list. And this is one that I also understand 100%. It's, you know, anywhere between $20 and $25, depending on your area. It is widely available everywhere for the most part. And it's 101 proof. I mean, it's still a great whiskey. You can drink it neat. You can put it in a cocktail. So it's got the versatility to be able to be used however you want to use it. Given all of those factors, I absolutely think that this is one that should be on those lists. I think that this is one that a lot of people maybe had different experiences with back in the day and maybe don't want to reach back for that bottle again. And I understand that. But I still think it's worth trying it again if you haven't had it in a long time. There are some alternatives to this. If you've maybe had Wild Turkey 101, but you're trying to elevate it a little bit, I would go with the Kentucky Spirit. That's 101 proof, single barrel. So basically this, but a single barrel. I think that that can actually start to introduce you to maybe a few other Wild Turkey products that you'd be more familiar with it. If you're familiar with a 101 proof, jumping to a rare breed might be too hot. But if you're familiar with that 101 proof and you go to Kentucky Spirit, you're familiar with the proof, but now you can start to dissect those flavors a little bit more and see this one has this and this one doesn't, or whatever the case is, and help develop your palate a little bit more. And number 8, Blanton's Bourbon. So this one is probably one of the most polarizing whiskeys that exists right now. One of them. Polarizing in a sense that whiskey enthusiasts seem to have a lot of hate towards this bottle. And people that are just getting into whiskey love the fact that this is in a collection somewhere. So I think that there's just different mindsets when it comes to this particular bottle. If you're somebody that's getting into whiskey and you go to the Bourbon Trail and you go to Buffalo Trace and you find out about Blanton's and you hear about it, maybe they have it in the gift shop. That's exactly what happened to me years ago. That's what happened. That's how I figured out about Blanton's years ago. So the fact that some people get hate on that, I don't think it's right. I mean, at the suggested retail price, Blanton's is a great bottle to own, definitely. And it's one that if you have an opportunity at the regular retail price, for sure, definitely go ahead and add it to your collection. I think where some of that hate starts to come in is either adding it into a collection and never trying it, or paying way more than what it should be. There's been retail stores here in my area that I've gone to, and they're selling these bottles for 150, 160 plus. I've seen it go higher than that. So I don't like it in the sense that you are a company or a brand that's taking advantage, and not Blanton's. They don't set the price. It's whatever retailer that you're at. That retailer trying to price gouge a customer that maybe isn't as familiar. They see Blanton's. They know that Blanton's is supposed to be a very popular name, a very rare bourbon, or hard to find, hard to come by. And you're taking advantage of that person by bumping that price up to $150 or $200. That's what bothers me about this whiskey. If you're trying to prevent flippers and all this other stuff, I don't know. What do you do, right? It's tough. So what I say is this. This bottle is good. Absolutely. If you find it at retail price, buy it. Everybody should have a bottle of Blanton's, or at least have tried it at some point in their lives. Once you've tried it, and once you've tried other whiskeys, I think you'll start to realize that there's a lot of really good whiskey that taste-wise will taste better than this. I'm sure you can find a bottle that you enjoy better than Blanton's. And sometimes the pricing is either better or right around the same area that you're willing to pay for Blanton's. So I think that focusing on this one as like this is the only whiskey there and not trying anything else, I think I would disagree with that. I think you need to try different things. I think you need to just get an understanding of where Blanton should be and make sure somebody's not price gouging you. Now, if you've got money and you don't really care and you're going to pay $200 just to have it in your collection, by all means, it's your collection. It's your whiskey. It's your money. You do whatever you want to do. My suggestion would be try it with a friend maybe or something like that first before you spend that type of money. Try it at a bar or whatever the case is. And again, if the opportunity presents itself, and with this bottle, I do think the opportunity will present itself. I mean, I've seen it in enough places, and I've seen it in enough places under $100 to where you could buy it and have it in your collection and whatever the case is. But also try everything else. That's the other thing I'd say too. But I think when you're on those tours and you're excited about whiskey and you're getting to know these brands, and maybe Blanton's is just one that you're familiar with or whatever, start somewhere. Everybody starts somewhere. And if that's what gets somebody into whiskey and into bourbon because they heard about Blanton's and this is rare and this is pretty cool, then let them have that. Stop trying to tear them down and all this other stuff, because they've experienced something different than what you've experienced. It's all about finding what bottles you enjoy, what brings you happiness, especially when it comes to this hobby of collecting bourbon or drinking bourbon or trying bourbon or whatever you want to say. If this is something that gets somebody into it, let them have it. And that does it. That's 8 bottles of bourbon that are highly ranked, highly favored, whatever you want to call it, the most highly ranked whiskeys that exist right now. It seems like, at least the list I look at, these seem to be on every single person's list. There's a lot of them that I left out, but I think these 8 seem to find their way somewhere on a list every single year. And a lot of them within good reason. I think the thing to remember is that although these are good, although people on the internet are telling you that these are good and this is what you should like, doesn't mean you have to like this list. Doesn't mean that you have to only have these whiskeys on your list. The one thing I say every time is try a bunch of different whiskeys, try a bunch of different price points, and see what you actually enjoy. That's what it's all about. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.